Okay, so now we are going to start the process of turning this Photoshop design of our homepage into code. So to begin, on my desktop, I've created a directory called blog. As you can see, there's nothing in here just yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this into Sublime Text. And I'm going to create a few new files. So I'll create one. Let's call this index.html. And let's create a new folder, call this SCSS, and that should be good for now. So let's open up this index.html. So first thing I want to do is just add some basic HTML structure. So let's first make a doc type, HTML, then let's say HTML, and inside of here we will add a head tag. I want a title and say Mackenzie Child, part designer, part developer. Change this to your name, obviously. And then let's create a body tag as well. Inside the body, let's just say H1, say this works, exclamation, save that. And let's go back to the Finder with our folder, and let's change this, or grab this and go to Chrome and click and drag that, and you see this works shows up. So we're looking good so far. So how do we get from this to this? Well, let's start out by creating just the structure. So the first thing let's take care of the header. So we have a header with a logo and some navigation. So inside of this, let's get rid of the H1 tag for now. Let's add a header tag, and I'm going to add an ID of main. ID equals main navigation, and let's add a class of Clearfix. All right, so inside of here, we have a logo, which is going to be an A tag. So I'll say A href, and we'll just stub it out for now so it doesn't go anywhere. Let's add a class to this, class of name, and let's just put our name inside of here. I'll put Mackenzie Child and then close that. So if I go back to Chrome and refresh, Mackenzie Child as a link, beautiful. Next thing I want to do is add the navigation. So let's open up a nav tag. I'm going to use a bit of Emmet, which if you haven't checked that out, go to just search for Emmet. I believe it's emmet.io. Yeah, emmet.io. I would definitely check this out. It makes web development super easy because you can do things like write an A tag and say I want 3 of those, or A times 3, and it creates all those for you. Saves a lot of typing. It's pretty awesome. So let's say one would be the articles. Next, let's stub it out as well. Projects, stub it out, and contact for the last one. Save. Let's close that, refresh. Perfect. So let's go ahead and start styling this. So what we want to do is under the SCSS folder, I'm going to create a new file, and this first one's going to be called application.scss. Since we are working locally, we're going to need something to convert our SCSS into plain old CSS. So for that, I'm going to use a program called CodeKit. And what CodeKit will do is it will compress and compile the SCSS into regular CSS, which Chrome and the other browsers will be able to read. So what I'm going to do is go back to the Finder, and let's drag this entire thing onto CodeKit. Then for the SCSS, let's click on the application.scss. The output style, let's change to compressed. That way it minifies it as we go. And then the output down here, it's going to create a folder of CSS, and everything we write into here is going to compile into an application.css. So if I compile that and I go back to Sublime, you can see there's now a CSS folder and an application.css file. So let's go ahead and style this header. So for that, I'm going to get rid of the sidebar, and I'm going to bring up 2 panels by hitting Command Option 2, so we can work side by side. And I'll bump up the size so you guys can see it all right. Okay, so we have the ID of main navigation. So let's find that first, main navigation. Let's do a padding of 2.5 em and 5%. So 2.5 em on top and bottom and 5% on each side. So if I save that and you go back and refresh, nothing happens. Why is that? Well, since we're working locally and not on Rails just yet, we need to actually include the CSS file inside of our HTML. So let's just add a link, and the href will be the path to the CSS. So the path would be /css/application.css. So if I save that, go back and refresh, still not showing up. Let me hit Option Command C to bring up the developer tools. And the main header, actually, no, Option Command U, you can see that file path is not correct. So there we go. So it's actually CSS, not a /. So just CSS/application.css. All right, so let's go ahead and make this look like this. So first off, let's tackle the logo. So for that, we're gonna select the class of name. So let's do .name. Let's change the font weight to 700. Let's do font size 0.7 em, and let's do a text transform of uppercase to make it all uppercase. Let's go back and refresh. All right, that's looking good so far. Let's add a border of 2 pixels solid, and let's say X E9, E9, E9. Save that, refresh. All right, let's add some padding to that. Let's do 0.75 em and 1 em on either side. All right, to get rid of the line underneath, let's do text decoration, none. Perfect. Let's change the color to the dark, but let's go back to Photoshop. So we have these 2 colors. We have the dark gray and the blue, and then the lighter gray. So let's define what those are. So I'm going to grab the highlighter tool. If I could find that, here it is. Let's select that dark gray color and then grab the hex value for that, copy it. Let's go back to Sublime. Up top, I'm going to define a few variables. So I'm going to say 1 is dark, and I'm going to add that hex value. Let's do another one for that light color. There we go. And let's paste that in. Then the highlight color, which is going to be this blue. Let's copy that. Make one called highlight. And then finally, let's do this, the border color, which is the E9, E9, E9. So I'm going to copy that. Let's say border. Whoops. There we go. Now we can change this to the border variable. And the reason we are setting up these variables is because say we have the highlight color used in a dozen places. Instead of having to, say we want to change this color to like a red instead of the blue, we only have to change it in one spot in this variable instead of all throughout each style sheet. So let's change the color of this to that dark color. Save, go back and refresh. Perfect. And let's float the name to the left. Now let's start working on the navigation. So for this, I'll say nav Let's float the nav to the right, save and refresh. All right, so that pulls it over here. Then let's target the hrefs inside of that. So put an A. Let's change the color to dark. Let's bring text decoration none. Let's add a margin on either side of 0 on top and bottom and 1 rem on either side. And let's make the font size 1 rem. Refresh. Perfect. All right, so this looks pretty good. One thing I want to do next is use normalize. If you search for normalize CSS, normalize, it's a modern HTML5 alternative to the CSS resets. So basically, normalize will make every browser start from the same point, because every browser has slightly different starting points in terms of styling. So what we are going to do is copy this, or download, and then copy all the normalized files. Let's open up the sidebar and create a new CSS file. Save that and call this normalize. Actually, underscore normalize.css or SCSS. The reason we are doing it this way is because inside of our application.scss, we can use the import, and we'll do normalize. There we go. So this brings in the normalized CSS. You can see the fonts have changed a bit, and the padding that is there by default is removed, and a bunch of other CSS resets. Normalize is fantastic. I use it on just about every project I do. All right, so now that that is taken care of, let's go ahead and finish up styling this. So the main navigation, if we go back to the Photoshop file, zoom out a bit, it has this border on the bottom. So let's take care of that. So on the main navigation right here, in addition to the padding, let's add a border bottom, 1 pixel solid, and let's do the border color. Go back, refresh. All right, that's looking pretty good. But as you can see, it's pushed right up against here, and that is because both of these are floated. So what we need to do is add a clear fix. So since we will be using a clear fix on multiple places, I'm just going to define a clear fix class. So what we're going to do is clear fix before and .clear fix after. We're going to do content, just space, and then display table. And then we'll also do .clear fix after. And what we'll do is clear both. So now, since this has a class of clear fix right here, if we go back and refresh, you can see the padding is actually taking effect because the float on these two, the name and the navigation, are cleared. So one last thing, you can see that there's much more spacing on the bottom than the top of the navigation. So let's fix that by adding some padding on top. So let's go back to the navigation under the float right. Let's do padding top. Let's just start at 1 rem and see how that goes. That looks good, but maybe let's do 0.9. There we go, that looks perfect. This looks a little small, so I'm going to bump that up a bit. Let's change it to 0.85. Maybe 0.8. There we go. Let's try adding some letter spacing to this. Let's try 4 pixels. That looks pretty good. All right, and let's add a slightly more padding to the logo. So instead of just 0.75 on top and bottom, let's just add 1 rem all the way around. That looks pretty good, but the padding over on the navigation got messed up now. So let's change that to 1.1. See how that looks. Maybe 1.25, 1.4. There we go. That looks maybe 1.5. There, perfect. That looks pretty good. All right, so if we go back to our design, the next thing we have the about section, the articles, and the projects. Before we get into that though, what I want to do is change the font, because right now it's just a serif font. What I want to use is the Railway font that we used in our design. So let's search for Railway font Google. Brings up the Google Railway font. And if you click Open Railway in Google Fonts, what we want to do is have the normal and the bold. So let's select the two of those, and then you can add this code to your website. Let's just copy that. Go to the HTML inside the head. Let's paste it above the style sheet. And if we go back to integrate the font in your CSS, we have to do font family Railway sans serif. Let's add that as well. So right below the variables, let's add a body tag and paste in that. All right, so if we go and refresh, you can see the font has changed. Beautiful. All right, so we are good to go. Let's move on to the about section. So let's take a look at this real quick. So if we think about this in terms of code, we are going to want one div to wrap around all of this, and then a div to wrap around each of these separate columns. So let's go back to our index.html. Under the header, let's say, let's make a dot wrapper class. And since this will also be floated inside, each of these columns will be floated to the left to get this horizontal layout. Let's add the clearfix class to this div as well. So inside of here, we're going to have 3 columns. So what I'm going to do, let's add a class of column 1 and a column of homepage content. That looks pretty good. Then let's also do column 2 and homepage content. And let's do the same for column 3 and homepage content. Whoops. Perfect. Okay, so inside of the first column, the about column, let's have an H2 and say about. Then let's do a, for the little line break right here, what we'll do is an HR tag. And then let's add a P tag for each of these lines of text. So what I'll do is I'll just paste this in, and then I'll write a P tag around each one of these. And as you can see, Sublime's throwing up an error for these. The HTML code for an ampersand is the and symbol and then AMP and semicolon. So let's copy that, do it here as well. All right, save and go back, refresh. All right, that looks good. Let's fix that. So next thing, let's do the stuff I've written. So I'm going to copy this. Let's go back to Sublime. Inside of column 2, let's do an H2 tag, say stuff I've written. Do another HR. These ones are going to be a bit different if we go back. These should be a header tag, and then let's add a P tag with class of date for those. So we'll add an H3, and I'll just say the do list for the title, and let's say p.date, and I'll just say, what do we have here? I'll just copy this. Friday, April 10th. Right. And let me copy those 3 times. What was the other titles? Back in Photoshop, How Do I Learn X and Strive for the Uncomfortable. So let's save and refresh. All right, that looks good. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the stuff inside of here for the third column, since it will be pretty similar. And instead of stuff I've written, I'll say stuff I've built. And I'll say unicasts, the Mackenzie Child community, and the last one, 12 and 12 challenge. All right, that looks good for now. Let's start styling this. So the first thing, let's take care of that wrapper. So let's go into the application.scss and let's make a wrapper class. And this is going to be a width of 90%. Let's just do a margin of 0 auto to center that div. Let's close and normalize. So if we go back and refresh, you can see it's centered at 90% of the viewport. So let's start on the styling of the welcome page. So let's create a new SCSS file. Oops. And I'm going to call this welcome.scss. The reason we are doing that is because these styles are going to be specific to the welcome page or the home page. So I will just do an @import welcome at the bottom. Save. Now let's go to welcome. So the first thing, let's take care of these columns. So we have a column of 1, a column of 2, and a column of 3. Each of these are going to share a float left, and then we're going to do the widths a bit separate. So let's do a column 1. Let's make the width of 45% because this is the about section is going to be a bit wider than the others. And then let's add a padding of 0, 5% on the left, 0, and 2.5% on the right. And then the column 2 and the column 3, let's make the width 27.5% and padding of 0 and 2.5% on the other side. Got an error on my CSS. Let's take a look, see if I messed something up. Unexpected class name. I am confused as why that's happening. Let me comment that out real quick. Actually, I'm just going to copy this, save. Let's try putting it here, see if it's an issue with the @import, which it is not. Expected class name was dot. So it's on line 53, so something with this one. Oh, duh. Okay, so there's a period after that. Okay. There we go. So I will just undo that, uncomment this, and delete that period. Stupid mistakes like that are annoying. All right, so you can see these are floated to the left, but it's not all in one line. And the reason for that is because the way I styled it with this padding, all of this is being added together at the same time. So to take care of that, we're going to add a little trick. Let's do star, and I'm going to do box sizing, border box. So if I go back and refresh, so what that does is this, so when you add box sizing border box, it means that the padding that we added doesn't add to the width of each column, but it's still getting calculated. It's pretty nifty trick. All right, so this is looking okay. Let's go ahead and start styling this stuff. First off, let's start doing some stuff with the text. So let's go back to our application.scss, and I'm just going to write some rules for the typography real quick. Let's make everything H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. Let's do P, UL, LI. Let's make them all have a color of dark. Let's make the H1 a font size of 2.5 rem. Let's do an H2 font size of 2 rem. H3 font size of 1.75 rem. H4 font size of 1.375 rem. H5 font size of 1.25 rem. And finally the H6, which is the last header, let's do a font size of 1 rem. All right, and now for the P and LI, let's make this have a font size of 1.1 rem to start and a line height of 1.75 to make it nice and spread out. All right, so we have another error on line 48. So right here, oh, I use a semicolon instead of a colon, save that. All right, perfect. That's looking pretty good. All right, and finally, for the typography, let's do one last thing. For the P, the UL, OL, and let's do a margin of 0, 0, and on the bottom we'll do 1.6 M. All right, so that makes it spaced a bit more. Now let's start styling these columns. So if you remember, each one of these have a homepage content class. So let's do homepage content. So inside of here, let's style these H2s first. Let's do a font size of 1 rem. Go back and refresh. Makes it a bit smaller. Maybe 1.1. All right. And then let's do text transform uppercase. Make it all caps, as in the Photoshop document. Now, let's go back. Let's take care of the HR tags. So out of the H2 tag, let's do an HR. Let's make the width be 3M. Let's make it a display of block. Height is going to be 2 pixels. Let's make it a border of 0 and a border top of 2 pixels solid. Whoops, 2 pixels. And this is going to be the highlight color. And let's do a margin of 2 rem and 0. So if I save this, I am going to get an error, I believe. Oh, maybe not. Okay, cool. I thought I was going to get an error because this highlight is not defined in this file, but it's being pulled into this, which does have the variable, so we're good. All right, so that looks good. One thing that's bugging me is it's pushing right up against that. What I'm going to do is add another class. I'm going to say wrapper padding. Save that. So let's go back to our application under the wrapper. Let's do dot wrapper padding. Let's do padding of 4 rem and 0. So 4 rem on top and bottom. Perfect. Looks much better. All right, back to the columns. So next thing we need to do is style these H3 tags. So let's do the H3. Let's do a font size of 1.25 rem or M. Let's do a font weight of 400 to make it a regular font weight instead of the bold. And let's do a margin bottom of 0.5 M. Go back and refresh. All right, that's looking better already. Let's bump up the size of it slightly, maybe let's try 1.35. Cool, that looks pretty good. Let's also take care of the div with the class or the p tag with the class of date. So let's go below the H3 and say .date. All right, and let's do a font size. Let's make this one pretty small, 0.8 M. Let's do a margin bottom of 2M, and the color, let's make it that light color. That's looking pretty good. So it's a lot smaller and it's great, and it's pushing down the next H3. That looks pretty good to me. So this spacing looks a little much. So what I'm going to do is under here, let's just select the P tags, and let's do a margin of 0, 0.75 M, and 0. There we go. That brings it a bit tighter. And then I want to add a bit more padding just to this column and not all 3 columns. So what I'm going to do is add a specific class, say about, and then under here I'm going to select the .about class. And let's add a padding of 0.75%, or 7.5%, I'm sorry. 0 and 0. All right. And we are going to have a few A tags. So let me mock one up. ahref equals hash, and I'll stub it out for now. And I'll close it. We want the links to be styled a bit differently. So what we're going to do for that is come back to the SCSS, select the A tag just for the about section, because these are also links, so we don't want these to be styled. So just on the about column, let's change the color to that highlight color, and the font weight, let's make it bold. So 700. Come back, refresh. That is not taking effect. Let's see why. So the about column, oh, you know what? I think it's because I'm inside of the homepage content. So I'm going to select this and get out of there. Refresh. There we go. So what that did is it removed the padding on the side so it lines up with the edge of the logo, and it makes this bold and the blue highlight color. And let's also take off the, let's do text decoration none to remove that line from the bottom. Perfect. So this looks pretty good. The last thing we need to do, if we go back, is the footer. So let's go back to Sublime, and outside of the homepage or the wrapper column or div, let's add a footer tag. Let's add an ID to this. I'll say ID equals main footer. And let's add a P with the class of copyright. And I'll say option G to get the copyright symbol. 2015 Mackenzie Child. Save and go back and refresh. All right, that looks good. Whoops. Okay, actually, instead of the option G, let's do, I believe it's and copy and semicolon. There we go. That's the HTML version of the copyright symbol. Beautiful. Next, let's do the links. So we're going to add another nav in here. I'm going to add 3 A tags. Let's stub all these out for now. These are going to be the social icons. If we go back, it's going to be the Twitter, GitHub, and Dribbble. So for this, I'm going to use Font Awesome. So let's go here. Under the Getting Started section, they have a CDN. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use their CDN, copy this, and go up top, just like we did for the Google font. Let's paste that in. And now we can go under the icons. Let's just do a Command F and search for Twitter. There we go. And I'm going to copy their code, go back, and let's just paste that in, see what happens. So the Font Awesome is coming up. It's not showing up for some reason. I wonder if it may be because of the way this is, or it may be because we are using this locally. Let me try to add HTTP. See if that makes a difference, which it did. So you can see down at the bottom, the Twitter icon is now showing up. So what I'll do is I'll copy this, and I'm just going to guess on these: FA Dribbble and FA GitHub. Awesome. But it's showing multiple of those for some reason. That's strange. Let's look at the source again. Interesting. Well, let's fix the styling for now, and then we will figure out what's going on with that. So down at the bottom, let's add that footer. So we're going to do main footer. So just like the header, let's add a padding of 2.5 em and 5%. Let's add a border instead of border bottom. I'm just going to copy this. Let's do a border top. So save, refresh. That looks awesome. So let's do the copyright. Let's float it left, and let's make the font size small, so 0.9 em. And let's do a margin bottom, actually margin of 0. Then for the navigation, let's do nav float right. And then the I tags inside of the nav, let's do a color dark. Margin left to add some spacing of 1 em. Padding top to center it, let's do 0.2 em. And let's just see how that looks for now. All right. I'm really not sure why all these are showing up multiple times. Twitter's not, but the others are. Let me search for GitHub. And maybe do the same for Dribbble. Here we go. Save and go back. Refresh. Beautiful. There it is. All right, let's add a hover state for the I tag. So we'll do and:hover. And let's change the color of this to the highlight. Go back and refresh. Perfect. This is looking great. Let's add a hover state to these as well. So one thing I forgot is these are actually going to be links. So if I change this to an A tag, and go back and refresh, you can see the styling is different. So to take care of that, we need to add some specific styling for the A. So what we want to do is go back to welcome.scss. So let's add it under the H3. So select the A. Let's do text decoration of none to get rid of the underline. Let's change the color of dark, or to dark, and let's add a hover state for those as well. Just change the color to highlight. Go back, refresh. Perfect. So now what I'll do is I'll copy these. Actually, it'd probably be easier just to copy the A tag and paste it in. And I'll do the same for the projects or the articles. Perfect. All right, so this looks good. Next up, we will style the articles page.